He arrested her without reason, accused her of lying. But when he tried to take control, he learned the hard way that she wasn't with whom to mess with. The afternoon sun hung low over Laredo, Texas, casting long shadows and golden on the cracked sidewalks. Lieutenant Esperanza Morales moved through the streets with a silent confidence of the kind that comes from years of discipline, knowing exactly what was her dark brown eyes. Scanning the neighborhood, familiar yet distant, like a childhood home that was left untouched for a long time, hadn't returned in 7 years. Not since he thought he had enlisted not long after burying his mother. It was strange how little had changed in the same convenience store in the corner. They were still advertising 2-for-1 sodas. The same barbershop with its faded signs and basketball court where the guys played as if their lives depended on it. The laughter, the voices, smell of carnitas tacos from Dona Carmen's restaurant enveloped her, pulling her back to memories that he hadn't thought about in years. Adjusted the backpack he was carrying on his shoulder. He wasn't wearing anything that screamed military. Just a simple, well-fitted t-shirt, cargo pants, and sneakers, worn out but still in civilian clothes. He carried himself differently. Square shoulders, chin-level steps measured, was not something that his father could turn off. He used to call it the warrior stance. She smiled slightly at the thought. He would have been proud if I were still here, while a group of kids passed by. Teenagers gathered outside a corner store. One of them, maybe 16 years old, turned to look at her and made a double take and then nodded respectfully. Are you military? Asked Esperanza. He stopped, finding his gaze something like that. The guy smiled. I imagined it. My cousin is in the army. He walks like you. Before one of his friends could respond, called him inside, and just like that he left, exhaling like that, reminded her why she fought, why she resisted. She had spent years in places that the most people only saw. Fallujah in war documentaries. Mogadiscio had led teams in the early morning through chaos and enemy fire, threw off sandstorms that swallowed sound and light, and now here he was back home walking streets that felt both familiar and strange. He had spent his 20s in war zones, 30s trying to process what the war had done to her. Now in her 40s, she wasn't sure what teat meant home already, but her thoughts were interrupted by 8th Patrol car. Approached his side. Its slow advance, out of place, in a neighborhood where police usually passed through at full speed without a second glance. She kept walking, pretending not to notice, but I knew the procedure. The window rolled down. A harsh voice shouted, Me, miss. She stopped, turned slightly, and saw Officer Bradley Mitchell, white, mid-40s, military haircut, thick arms, and the kind off smirk that said he was enjoying this a little too much. His mirrored sunglasses hid high size, but she could feel them scanning her as if she were out of place. Would you mind telling me what is doing here? Asked Esperanza, looking at him intently for a moment. A legible expression. He had encountered men like him before. Men who saw a confident Latina woman and confused with a challenge. Adjusted the strap of his backpack. Just walking to where? I raise an eyebrow. I didn't know I needed an itinerary to walk down my own street. Mitchell didn't like that. His mocking smile faded a bit. We've had some thefts around here, he said. I have to make sure everything is in order. Esperanza held her unflinching gaze. Do you see me stealing something? Silence. A muscle in her jaw twitched. He leaned against the open window, exhaling sharply. I just do my job. Esperanza exhaled through her nose, fighting the urge to shake her head. Well, I'm just walking. I could feel the weight of the moment changing. Mitchell wasn't looking at conversation, was looking for control, and something about her, whether it was her presence here, the way he refused to back down, was not to his liking. 2 options, keep participating or leave. But before Michelle could decide, he put the car in park. Wait a second, let's see some identification. Esperanza didn't move. It had been trained to assess threats around exits, and right now, it was not just evaluating a man. The officer was evaluating a man who was getting too comfortable pushing his authority. But already I knew one thing. This wasn't over. The street was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chatter from a nearby store, but at this moment, none of that. Tension between Esperanza and Officer Bradley Mitchell was thick, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to explode. She didn't move, she didn't flinch. Identification, Mitel repeated, this time with less patience. Esperanza looked at her hands, her right thumb casually resting near the safety of her holster. Intentional silent warning. Or could not feel the heat of the eyes on Shay. Some people had noticed the stop, some had slowed their steps, observing. Waiting, he slowly put his hand in his pocket, keeping his movements measured. He took out this military identification and lifted it but didn't hand it over. Mitchell squinted his eyes, then she looked back at her. Military, and his tone was unreadable. But Esperanza had encountered men like him before. The kind who saw a woman like her and decided that the uniform didn't matter. It was enough that the rank was not enough. Where exactly it serves, I do not answer you necessary questions, Mitchell said calmly, exhaling through his nose, lips pressing together. That's how he snatched the identification from him. The hand before I could react, turning it between his fingers with a smile mocking slit across his face. Navy SEALs read aloud, dragging through as if they were some kind of joke. How nice. A flash of warmth passed through the chest of Hope. Not Angel. The same kind I had felt hundreds of times before in rooms full of men who assumed I didn't belong. Give it back to her. His voice was firm, controlled. Mitchell studied her, head tilted slightly, as if trying to decide if the problem was worth it too. No, I've been in the force for 20 years. I've seen all kinds of people come through this neighborhood. He paused. Never, I had met a Navy SEAL woman before. Are you sure this isn't fake? The insult was so blatant, so ridiculous, that Esperanza almost laughed. You can verify it in your system, he said dryly. You'll realize soon. But that wasn't what Mitel wanted. I wanted a reaction. Flipped the card again, lips curling as if RDI would have decided that she was lying. Do you expect me to believe that you have been out there fighting for this country for a small change? But Esperanza caught it. The people observing her, curiosity was changing. It was no longer just a traffic stop. It was something. Moreno, a young woman, was standing on the sidewalk with her phone in hand recording. He wasn't hiding. He wanted Michelle to see. That was the thing about power. It changed depending on who was watching. Mitchell noticed his shoulders squared slightly, his posture changing. Do you have a problem? He asked the woman. She didn't respond. He just kept recording. Esperanza was still standing perfectly still. She smiled just a little now. Miticoscopio turned his gaze towards her, his jaw tightening. I don't appreciate people trying to make a spectacle of me doing my job. Then stop putting on a show, said Esperanza. A flash of something dark passed through. Her expression took a step, just an inch, but it was an deliberate movement, a challenge. Hope did not move. I don't know who you think you are, said Mitel in a low voice, but out here, I make the decisions. Her smile was subtle enough to let him know he was making a mistake. Are you sure about that? Mitel's grip tightened, and then it did exactly with that she was waiting for reached her wrist. Bad idea. The moment when the fingers of Bradley Mitchell brushed against Hope's wrist, she moved quickly and precisely. Calculated. His arm moved just enough to break his grip before it formed completely, not aggressively, not in a way that could be mistaken for an attack, just enough to show Mitchell's eyes blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected that. The crowd watching grew. The woman with the phone recording took a step forward. A man on the other side of the street crossed his arms, shaking his head. A couple next to a food truck stopped eating completely. All eyes were on them. Hope let out a sigh down his nose, calming himself. His training had drilled theme iteration in his bones. Discipline first always. That's assault. The voice of Mitel carried too much confidence, as if he thought those words alone gave him power. Hope barely a blink. It's not called avoiding unnecessary contact. Her expression darkened. Do you think this is a joke? I tilted my head slightly. I seemed to be laughing a bit. A flash of frustration crossed his face. Mitel had expected cooperation on his mission. At least, instead of this, he was getting resistance wrapped in calm, with an unyielding posture. He didn't like his hand move towards his dispatch radio. I need reinforcements. For what? Esperanza interrupted softly. Mitello's mouth on a thin line for a suspect who doesn't cooperate. Snort. From the crowd, someone murmured, this is bullshit. Before contain herself. The woman with the phone said that you are the only one who is not aggressive. Mitel's ears turned red, but he didn't look at her. He was too caught up now, too deep in his own pride. Hope you could see it. You had been in sufficient tense situations to recognize a man at the breaking point. Mitchell wasn't going to backtrack. Not now, not with so many eyes on him. That choosing his next words carefully. Officer Mitchell said in his measured tone, he is making a mistake. His nostrils flared. No. You made Thera when you decided you could walk away from me. Took a step closer, a step too far. Turn around, hands back from the back. Esperanza inhaled slowly. She could feel the change in the energy. The moment it was spiraling. She knew where this was headed. Mitchell wanted to make an example of her. He wanted her handcuffed. No, because I would have done something wrong if I hadn't obeyed him the way he expected, and that couldn't billow it. The crowd also felt it. A murmur rolled through them. The people he was raising their phones higher. The air thickened with unspoken tension. Hope could feel her pulse stabilizing. Her instincts sharpening. I had three options. Handcuff him, let him go, give in, allow myself to be treated like in front of the whole neighborhood. Not an option to run for us a chase van worse, or stop this before it escalates to something neither of us could come back from. He chose the third one, Mitchell said, his voice calm but firm. If you put those handcuffs on me, you're going to regret it. His mocking smile returned, but this time was forced. It is a threat. The eyes of Hope never waver. It's not a fact, but Mitel decided. His hand went down to his belt, and that was Thella's mistake he made that day. The moment Mitel reached for his handcuffs, Esperanza moved quickly, smoothly intentional. Before her fingers could even touch the metal, she pivoted. A simple change of posture, a calculated redirection, a step forward, a step to the side. Nothing more, but it was enough. Michel's balance wavered. His eyes widened for just a fraction off-stunned, while realizing that she was no longer in control. Esperanza did not attack. She didn't need to dot. Everything he did was to remove himself from his reach in a way that was so perfect, so precise, that Maitel looked ridiculous in front of the crowd. To the crowd, it must have seemed like he was clumsily tripping over his own feet, and that was worse than any blow. The gasps of the spectators. They confirmed. Wow, they completely lost it. Someone murmured. The young woman with the phone zoomed in, his expression unreadable. Maitel's face turned crimson red. Her breathing came faster now, her chest rising and falling as if she had just been insulted in the worst way imaginable. Hope stood completely still. Her hands relaxed at her sides. Officer Mitchell said slowly, carefully, "You are losing control of the situation." Her jaw clenched so tightly that she thought her teeth might break. She had humiliated him without a vignette. "I couldn't let that happen. Turn around. Hands behind your backpack." Her voice was high-pitched now, cut with pure frustration. Hope exhaled through her nose. "Why resisting arrest?" A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Why did a man shout near the corner store? "We all saw that he didn't touch him." Man, Mitchell demurred, his fingers flexed with an itch for something to hold on to. Hope had seen this before. A man cornered, desperate to regain his power, gave one last opportunity. "Doesn't want to do this," he said. Evan Limitel's breathing became heavier. His pride was screaming at him, demanding that he take control. Her authority put her in her place, so she made her decision, and it was a bad one. A decision. The body of Hope reacted before her mind had to. Her foot moved, her hand moved, caught her wrist in the air, twisted it with just the right amount of force to redirect her momentum, and suddenly was the one who was off balance. In less than a second, he had him flipped over. His own arm bent in a way that made the movement impossible. Had not even hurt. Haim applied full force, but for the spectators, the cameras recording, and more importantly for Mitaba himself, turned around like a rookie, and that was worse than anything else. A man in uniform, overwhelmed, in broad daylight, in front of a whole crowd, for a woman who thought she could intimidate instance. Maitel's breath came hard and uneven, her body rigid in shock. Hope kept her there for only one more second, just enough for him to understand, then he let go. Mitchell stumbled forward before catching himself, his arms flailing for just a second. Enough for every phone camera to capture it. The crowd erupted. "It can't be. It just flipped." The woman recording shook her head, smiling. "Now I have every second of that." Mitchell's hands curled in fists, his entire body radiated pure humiliation. Hope remained completely calm. "Are we done?" asked his steady voice. Mitchell didn't answer. He couldn't answer then. A new voice cut through the air. "What the hell is going on here?" A second patrol car had just arrived. Sergeant Robert Hay, a more experienced major, and by the way, high size blinked between them. He already knew that something had gone very wrong. Sergeant Robert Hay stepped out of his patrol with calculated authority. His sharp blue eyes blinked between Maitel's red face and Handstight, breathing heavily. And Hope standing calm and unshakable in the middle from the street. But it was no longer just them. The whole block was watching. Them phones were up. Conversations had stopped. People were no longer just spectators. They were witness. Exhaled sharply. He already knew what had happened, yet had turned to Mitchell first. "Officer Mitchell, explain." Maitel's jaw worked, but words didn't come out immediately. He was too deep in his own humiliation to upset by the fact that he had just been flipped and brought. Hope could see the battle happening inside her head. She wanted to lie, twist the story to her, please play the victim, but then Heiss's gaze passed about the cameras, recording the murmurs of the crowd, the unmistakable stained public shame already spreading, and Mitchell knew there was no way out of this. She finally resisted her urgency. Low voice didn't want to comply, got aggressive. A snort came from the woman-hung man still filming. "That's a lie. And we all saw." Ithos didn't recognize her, but Esperanza caught the tension in his expression. He wasn't buying it either. He turned towards Hope. "Is that what happened?" She didn't hurry with her response. She didn't need to. "Doing it. He stopped me for no reason. Asked for my ID. I gave it to him. Then he accused me of lying about who I am. I paused long enough for the weight of his words to settle. When I refused to let him put handcuffs on me for no reason, he caught up with me. I stopped him." He exhaled slowly, evaluating, calculating. He knew the optics of this. A police officer. White, a Latina woman, a crowd watching with phones up, were a struggle that had gone too far. Then his eyes landed on thought-onification, still clutched in Maitel's hand. Her expression changed, then realization, then regret. Lieutenant Morales. The entire body of Maitel froze the moment his rank left. The eye's mouth had run dry. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Maitel's face paled. Posture hardening. Hope did not blink, did not mockingly blush, did not gloat. Just waited. Voice of he's silent now, but sharper. "Is you Navy?" "Yes, sir." Silence. The he returned to Mitchell's gaze. Did he know that Maitel's fingers had contracted around the identification? He didn't wait for an excuse. He turned around towards the crowd. "Does anyone have a recording of this interaction?" At least 10 hands went up. The young woman with phones smiled mockingly. "I have all of." Maitel's breath interrupted. Here knew what was coming. Officer Mitchell is relieved of duty, effective immediately. Gasping, whispers a low wave of disbelief. My face contorted, his transforming fists, can't be serious. I suggest you stop talking before this gets worse. The tone of he had a purpose. A warning. Mitchell's nostrils flared, his whole body trembled with rage. But he had nothing left. Esperanza held his gaze one last time without words. Just understanding. He had won, and he knew it yesterday. He turned towards Hope, his postures lightly changing, not defensive, not aggressive, respectful. Lieutenant Morales, do you wish to press charges? The air calmed. Mitchell froze, his breath shallow. The crowd leaned in, hoping for hope. Let the question settle. Let the weight off would hang over Maitel like a final judgment, then exhaled not. A wave of surprise passed through the crowd. Maitel looked at her in astonishment and studied Hera. Long moment. Are you sure? Hope nodded. I didn't come home looking for a fight. I just wanted to walk in my own neighborhood. The words hit hard. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Understood. What's wrong with him now? Asked, and he didn't sugarcoat it. Internal review. Probably suspension. Maybor's Mitchell looked sick. Esperanza didn't react. It was no longer her concern. He turned to leave, but then Mitchell did something no one expected. He spoke, his voice, silent and rigid. Why not pressing charges? Esperanza stopped and turned around, enough to finding her eyes. Her response was simple, because I had already taught her the lesson she needed to learn. And with that, he pushed away Hope, walked along the sidewalk with squared shoulders and steady steps. He didn't need turn to know that every eye in the crowd followed his departure somewhere behind her. Maitel was still standing, his entire career crumbling around Hema. Voice from the crowd broke the silence. That's what happens when you mess with mistaken one. Some silent giggles, some murmurs. The tension was lifting, changing to something more. A moment that people wouldn't forget. Didn't move for a few seconds. His eyes fixed on Maitel. Go home, officer. Mitchell didn't argue. He just turned rigidly, heading back to his patrol. His hands clenched at his sides. The cameras followed him. He was now public record the moment the door closed. Behind him, he exhaled and turned to the crowd. The show is over. Some people they left, but others stayed, still murmuring. The young woman with the phone gave Hayes a hard look before putting down his camera. He will return to work in a few weeks or so, right? He asked without being impressed. Didn't respond. He knew better than to make promises. Just send the recording, he said before heading back to her car. Hope kept walking, but not without Trumbo. Wasn't the type to get upset, not even during training. Deployments and high-pressure missions had built something inside her that could not be easily shaken, but that it didn't mean he was insensitive. As he passed the shop window, he caught his reflection in the glass. Same posture, same confidence, but something deep in his chest. Still, Bernadette wasn't anger. It was frustration, not just with Maitel, not just with this encounter, but with the fact that he never really finished. He had faced worse than him abroad, but there was something about having fighting the same battles at home that left a weight in his stomach. His father's voice echoed in his ears. Choose your battles, win the ones that matter. I had won this one, but how many more would there be? He kept walking, pushing the thought aside. Inside the police station, the consequences already. Thea had begun to feel the weight of the situation sinking on their desk. The recording had already been submitted. The department would have no choice but to review it. Mitchell, he was finished. Maybe not officially, maybe not immediately, but his reputation would not recover. His authority had been publicly devastated, and that was something no plaque could fix. She sighed, rubbing her temples. There was known that Maitel had a problem, had ignored the signs, but now he was in record, and the city was observing. Esperanza sat on the back steps of her father's old house, his worn wooden planks creaking slightly beneath her. The air was warm, thick with the aroma of freshly cut grass, and the distant crackling of something frying in a neighbor's kitchen made his shoulders relax for the first time all day. I was at home, but what did that mean? His hands rested on his knees, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the seams of his cargo pants. Spent years fighting battles abroad, defending a country that still couldn't always see her for what she was that it was, and today had been a reminder of that. The screen door behind creaked when opening. You always sit like that when you're thinking. I didn't have to turn around to recognize the voice. It was Uncle Miguel. He came out to the porch, stepping down the steps beside him. He had broad shoulders, and his hair was gray at the temple. Was a man who had seen his share of fights, just not the kind with bullets. He placed a bottle of iced tea on his side, then opened his with a silent whistle. For a moment, they just sat. Teresa Miguel exhaled through his nose. And you ended up on the news. Esperanza let out a small, dry laugh. She wasn't planning it. Miguel shook the head. We never plan it, but problems find us anyway. He lifted the bottle, rolling the condensation between his fingers. It wasn't a problem. He glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. That wasn't a problem either. Paz didn't respond immediately, because he wasn't wrong. There was hope. I have been trained to face enemies, to neutralize threats, to walk into danger and come out the other side. But what about battles like today's ones, which were not fought with fists or weapons, but with perception, power, and prejudice? He tilted the bottle back, letting the cold tea wash away the dryness in his throat. Miguel watched her for a moment, then leaned forward with his forearms resting on his knees. You handled it well. My daughter nodded slowly. I did what I had to do. Miguel let out a small laugh, just like your father, which made her father smile. He had always taught him that strength wasn't just about fighting, it was about knowing when not to. Mitchell is going to feel. For a long time, Miguel's tone was thoughtful. But more than that, many people saw what happened today, and they will remember it. Hope spun the bottle in her hands. Does anything ever change? She asked. Or just woke? Keep fighting the same fight over and over again? Miguel sighed, running a hand through his beard. Are you asking the wrong question? She looked at him, hit his pistol against his knee. The question is not if everything changes. It's if anything changes. It's if anything changes. Let that settle, because she was right. She hadn't strayed from today changing the world, but maybe something had changed. Maybe some guy in that crowd saw what happened and realized he didn't have to shrink away when the authority got in his face. Maybe some other officers saw it and thought twice before doing the same trick. Maybe even Mitchell, although he doubted it, would look long and hard at himself some, and that was enough for now. Miguel nudged her with his elbow and know what? She exhaled while putting her bottle down. I keep walking. Her smile was small but full of pride. That's my girl. Sometimes the real fight isn't about winning or losing, is about standing firm, even when the world tells you to give an own. Side is about introducing yourself, speaking, and refusing to shrink back, because even if you don't change everything, you could change something. And sometimes that's enough to start the change. Like, share, subscribe, keep the conversation going, because these stories matter.